So it's a beautiful night, as all nights are beautiful here. You can almost see the stars tonight. A lot of times it's quite dark here, or it is quite foggy and you cannot see anything. But tonight you can see the moon peeking through and a couple of stars. And then of course the freeway always packed every time of day. Well, I shouldn't say packed, but certainly with a lot of traffic that's moving. And that's sort of the norm from me looking out at the street signs and the freeways here. It's kind of an interesting view. I always wonder, about who's inside those cars and what their life is like and where they're going, what they're doing. Do they have a great life? Is it someone's child just starting out? I mean, it's just such a good thing to think about in the world, because we're all connected. But back to the city, we have really interesting stuff going on here, of course, and you can find the really gritty ground level stuff on Nextdoor if you're kind of interested in that part. But the bigger stuff you can find here, like for instance, not Shreveport, that's a city actually, but Shreve and Company, the jewelers are actually leaving, and they've been here quite a while. So it's a little bit disappointing to see them go. They've been here 170 years. And not all that time in Union Square. Apparently they were over on Market Street for a short bit in the early 1900s. But they've been here a long time, and they're closing up shop, and that's really, really sad to see. A lot of our big institutions that have been here a long time. Macy's is probably the bigger one. Macy's has a amazing impact on everybody here, because if you've lived in the city a long time, it's just a tradition here at Christmas time to just pack up the family and head over to Macy's and watch them light the Christmas tree. And everybody makes a cursory round to Macy's in San Francisco if you live here during the holidays. It's just something that we do. We may not even buy anything, but Macy's used to be a pretty great store, actually. They had Wolfgang Puck restaurant in the basement. They had the cheese factory up top. It was just such a great place, and right across from, the big hotels and Union Square. It's such a shame to see it go. And according to Macy's, they're going to hang on in that spot for, I guess, as long as it takes to get a buyer. And to be honest with you, in this market, that might be quite a while, unless you're willing to mark your building down quite a bit, or sell your lease out, or whatever the case may be. Apparently they own the building, which is good for them, but the sale is going to depend on how much they want to take a hit on it, of course. As the market bears right now, that's sort of what we're looking at. But it's very sad to see these places go. We're losing Walgreens and CVS and dollar stores and things like that. We're losing those left and right. We're just shaking those loose here. And it sucks, because people go there and they want to get their pharmaceuticals and things like that, and everything is much less available than it was. But I believe that those shops, however important they might be, may not be as important as something like, say, Macy's. But who's to say, I guess, if you need medicines and you can't go elsewhere, then they're quite important. Another very important place that's going to be closing in 2025 is the Fillmore Safeway. And that Safeway, of course, is critically important to the area. There's many, many, many disabled people over there. There's communities of color. There's, people who don't have cars. That Safeway is very, very used. And it's a shame to see that go. For the people, not so much for Safeway. But they did sell the lot, apparently. And San Francisco's finest, our mayor, went over there and begged them to stay open for another year, so they did agree to that. So Safeway and Fillmore will be open until March of 2025, but it's still sad to see that because the communities suffer. And out of that suffering, we have another really, really dumb capitalist smothering sort of bill that they're trying to push through the Board of Supervisors. I believe it's sponsored by Dean Preston and Aaron Peskin, who are two of our pretty liberal, very liberal supervisors. It's something like the Grocery Notification Act, and it's an act that forces capitalist business and our capitalist system to notify the public 6 months before they plan on going out of business if they're an essential business, i.e. grocery store, basically. And if they don't do that, then the public will have a right to sue them, which is probably one of the dumbest bills I think I've ever heard in my life. You know, one thing California is really good at is just driving business out. You'll recall many, many years ago, you know, the people who are listening probably are a little bit older like me because talk radio doesn't work among the younger generation very well. It's not something they can get into because they can't identify with it. Everything's quick in the moment. But back in the day, of course, things were quite a bit different. We had a lot more available to us, I think, when there was less technology. But, you know, as a result of everything going online, we're kind of stuck with a situation where we have the inflated economy and people really reining back their spending versus internet buys. And sometimes it's just easier to buy things on the internet. Probably that's not the best way to go, but I think the combination of those two things are probably pretty lethal to us. But back to the Grocery Protection Act, I'm not sure that, Grocery Protection Act, sorry, I think I said it the wrong way first, but I'm not sure that will cruise through and really do anything as a bill, but it's really the kind of stupid bill that they enjoy putting forward here that sort of forces business out. And where I was going earlier when I lost my train of thought, so back in the day, California, before we became really, well, I don't want to say that particular word, but before we really suppressed capitalism like we do now with taxes and regulation and so forth, California made a ton of money by just renting the cities out for, you know, TV shows and renting them out for movies. And you'll recall, probably I would say before about mid 80s, maybe a little bit later than that, maybe early 90s, you would see many like TV shows and so forth filmed in the city, you know, in San Francisco, in LA. And if you go way back, you've got the Jimmy Stewart movies that, you know, Vertigo and all these lovely movies that were filmed here. You would never see those things today. The streets of San Francisco, you would never see that today because it is way too expensive and highly regulated now to film in these cities, i.e. it's been destroyed by the government here. So there's no opportunity for them to make any money off of that now. They've cut themselves off from that. And the regulation on businesses and the tax on businesses here is absolutely atrocious. We have a gross income tax here. We have a tax for the homeless. We have a tax for everything here. This is the highest tax state in the union, maybe followed by New York probably. And I know Hawaii's creeping up there too. California's just absurd. You just wouldn't even want to do anything here because of the tax and regulation. So as a result of that, in a high inflationary economy especially, people and businesses are fleeing here, as you know, which is a bigger problem that we've had over the last so many years. But I would say that businesses closing has gone on for quite a while, because I had several vegan restaurants that I just loved early on. And, I'm not a vegan per se, but I do enjoy a good vegan meal if they can mock the meat really well. And if you go to a great restaurant, they do. It'll taste just like, just like you're eating beef. If I could cook like that, I probably wouldn't eat beef, but that's beside the point. Those restaurants were fantastic, and all three of the ones that I just loved, they actually grew their own food, most of those. They had rooftop gardens, and then they would cook with the food. It was just incredible. Such a great meal, and cheap. And those restaurants were gone by the time we had the cerveza sickness in 2019, the pandemic, they were gone by then. So this is a trend that's been going on. It's not entirely new. And the priorities here of spending money, like California, for instance, are just not working here. They're not working. For instance, London Breed just came back from China on some sort of a fact-finding mission that we paid for I don't know how many weeks. And, she came back to announce that we were getting 2 cute, cuddly pandas, and we were going to be building them or refurbishing, I'm not really sure which, a $30 million enclosure at our zoo here. And, to me, that just seems so crazy. In a place where you don't currently really have money for the things you need, your priority is to bring pandas over here and give them a new zoo enclosure, which is crazy to me. We have so many things here that need attention. And, a whole night wouldn't even cover that. And I don't want to spend all my time talking about it, but just to hit the highlights. I think it's insane, to be honest with you. I don't think that's a good choice of how we spend our money. We have leadership problems here. There's no question about it. Will we get out of that? I don't know. It's very questionable. But we're going to need a different party in there, because the party that we have is very, very poor. And if you look at the different districts, and this is a thing that I notice in San Francisco especially, that most of San Francisco is absolutely filthy. But if you go to a place like Chinatown, you will not have the filth, which is an interesting concept to me, because you don't have the filth because something about Chinatown makes it cleaner than other places. You'll barely see a scrap, you'll barely see a gum wrapper on the ground in Chinatown. You will not find feces. You will not find people sleeping on the street. That's just something you will not find in Chinatown, period. And, for whatever reason that is, but whatever reason it is, it certainly seems like we could do something about that, doesn't it? It seems that we have an inability to clean everything up, which I think is pathetic, and it doesn't serve the public, for sure. So, how do we solve it? It always comes down to that. How do we solve it? And nobody running has any good ideas. And part of that, I think, is because we have the same type of people running all the time. People like me, for instance, and people have bothered me and really shook me up to try to get me to run for the Board of Supervisors, and I'm just not interested. I really, I'm an honest person, and I would never go far in a job like that, for one thing, just because of that. But the second thing is, I probably would be making about what I'm making right now, or slightly more than that, and with a lot bigger headache and a lot more time. And I probably wouldn't be changing anything. I can imagine I wouldn't be changing anything, which would make me very unhappy in the whole process. So I don't think for me it would work. I think it takes a certain kind of person to do that, and unfortunately it's the wrong kind of person. And I don't know why it is that seems to be the case, but it certainly seems to be. And as you know, we have a big election on the international front coming up. So, where do you put your thoughts? Where do you put your hopes and dreams? Are there places where you can put them now? Not for me, not in California. Sometimes I think the only reason I stay here is because A, I've been here so long, and B, I have relatives still here that I would like to see. And, when that changes, perhaps my viewpoint will change. I think that it's very hard for people who have obligations and they sort of get stuck in a place, but this place is really taxing me to death, and I'm not happy about that, to be honest. I have some investments that aren't taxed in the state that helps, but not much. So the latest thing is that Gavin Newsom wants to raise our gas tax to $2 a gallon. And I find this just very, very, very problematic. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know. I heard it on the internet, and I wasn't able to verify or not verify it, but if it is true, we're going to be in trouble here. And, that all fits with the bigger agenda of California and San Francisco with the C40 cities. And if you don't know what C40 city is, you should look that up. Look under the UN website, and you can find out about 15-minute cities and all kinds of good stuff on that website. Climate goals and all these things that are going to be coming into play in public policy, and actually already are. I actually at my job was having to listen to well, I wouldn't say it was a seminar, but I would say it was a little bit of a lecture on DEI. Our whole company had to sit and listen to it, and that's the new thing. That's the new thing. And if you don't like those things, you need to find out what they are, and you need to find a way to fight them. DEI doesn't make a lot of sense to me, honestly. I thought we were already doing all those things. Well, maybe there's a few differences in there. Transgender, I guess, was maybe added to everything, which is great. I don't have a problem with that. I'm respectful of people, so I don't tend to have too many issues on that front. But, that's just a whole thing in and of itself. But there was one thing I felt was a little bit distressing today that I saw. My friend sent me a picture of banners where they had renamed the Tenderloin the Trans District. And that, I guess that's okay. I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think it's a little pointed. I think it's a little non-representative of all of the people that live in the Tenderloin. It's maybe they meant it was like a safety zone or something for, a safe sanctuary area or something. Maybe that's what they meant by that. But to me, it's a little bit of a disservice to the whole community. The Tenderloin gets a bad rap. It is a very dangerous place. It's not, it's equal in its rap for that. But the Tenderloin is a very diverse community, and it's a very interesting community. There's a lot of really great ethnic restaurants, and just really, the Tenderloin has a lot to offer if you want to brave going into that particular area. I mean, you can find pretty much every restaurant you would want over there. They have Indian, Italian, Vietnamese, they have American fare, and they're all good, and most of them are cheap. So that's one thing about California, or well, San Francisco especially. If you want a really good meal, you have to go into the worst areas quite often here. It's not unusual to end up on 16th Street and, Valencia, which is way better than it used to be, but it still has pockets over there that are pretty rough. And where the areas that you would get good food are pretty much the rough pockets. But, that's San Francisco. We have a lot of really good dive bars, and we just have some really interesting stuff. And a lot of the good restaurants are over in the Tenderloin. You can get anything over there. You can pretty much get anything you want. But the diversity of people. There's a lot of young families over there, a lot of young immigrant families, and they bring some very interesting culture with them. And I'm sure it's pretty hard being over there in those apartments, with all the homeless and so forth. It's probably tough to bring the kids to school and things like that. And the parks get taken over sometimes by the homeless and the drug addicts, which is pretty much par for the course in San Francisco, actually, But, to sort of label it the trans district, well, I guess that's okay if it's okay with everyone else. I would have preferred something a little more inclusive, like maybe the diversity district or something nice like that, because there are things to appreciate over there besides trans issues, so it is what it is, I guess. But it was a little bit disappointing, I think. So anyway, back to the election on the bigger front, bigger international front. President Biden has agreed to debate ex-President Trump. I guess there'll be 2 debates, and one debate will be at the end of June, and I'm not really sure when the other debate will be. But I had heard a few days ago that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was trying to qualify for bumping into these debates and joining the debates, and that he had almost qualified. I guess you need a certain amount of following to qualify, like a certain percentage, I guess. And I guess he's almost at that percentage, and the other day it sounded like he pretty well had gotten himself into those 2 debates. And then now I hear that he will not be debating because the DNC, with all of its power, does not want him on the stage, apparently. And I think part of that is because, they shut him out of the primaries in their bid to restore democracy. And in that bid, he ended up becoming an independent and running as well, as you may know. So he's in the race. It's just a question of which ticket he runs under, which is not the Democratic ticket because they won't allow it while they're defending democracy. So apparently they shut him out of these debates as well, and I find that kind of interesting. But if you think about it, then, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. may sneak away with a whole lot of Biden supporters out of the ones that are left, because, he would be able to relay his message to the public. And that's one thing I noticed about RFK Jr. They don't want him anywhere near any place where he could speak to people and reach people. And that's neither here nor there. I like the guy, but I wouldn't vote for him. I don't think he sways people as much as they think he does. But be that as it may, they think that he does, and that's the point. So there will be definitely debates, apparently, which should be an interesting show, actually. I definitely don't want to miss those debates. I have my thoughts about who I will be voting for, and I don't think those thoughts are going to change. But it gives people a chance to listen to the 2 candidates go back and forth. And both having been president, that should be pretty interesting to hear. So So there you have it in my little insomniac spiel tonight. I hope you all have a great night, and I'm hoping to evolve these talks one of these days to maybe AM PM, and then having guests on and people call in. The shows that I enjoy the most for radio are ones that people actually call in, and then you discuss matters with the callers. But on that note, have a great night.